You walk into rooms and something feels wrong immediately. Not dramatic, not obvious, just off. The conversation is happening, people are laughing, heads are nodding, but inside you feel slightly misaligned, like you arrived a second too early or a step too late. You're there, but not in it. You're watching yourself be there. You don't hate people. That's important. You're not antisocial. You just notice how shallow most exchanges are, how scripted group energy feels, how quickly people mirror each other without thinking. And while everyone else seems relaxed inside that flow, your body stays alert. You listen more than you speak. You read tone, timing, tension. You pick up what's not being said. Let's say this clearly. This isn't shyness. You've probably been labeled too quiet, too serious, or too much in your head. You sense things before they surface, and when you try to explain why you feel uncomfortable, the words never land right. So eventually, you stop trying. You learn to nod, smile, blend. It works, but it drains you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Even when people accept you, something still feels missing. You can perform normalcy. You can be liked, but it never feels natural and it never fully settles. You keep thinking there's a manual everyone else got, and you somehow missed. This video isn't here to fix you, it's here to name what's happening, because once you see it clearly, you'll have to ask yourself something harder. Are you actually out of place, or have you just been standing on the edge for too long? You don't move the way most people do in social spaces. You notice that early. While others relax into the mood of the room, you stay slightly alert, not anxious, just aware. You feel the shifts in tone, the unspoken hierarchies, the moment when a conversation stops being real and turns performative. And because you feel that shift, you don't rush to join it. Most people don't understand this about you. They think you're slow to warm up, distant, or uninterested. But the truth is simpler. You don't absorb environments automatically. You evaluate them. You don't mirror energy just to belong. You pause, you check whether adapting would cost you something internally. Let's say this clearly. That pause is not weakness. It's discernment. You don't bond quickly because you don't bond cheaply. You don't feel safe just because everyone else does. You feel safe when something feels grounded, honest, and stable. That makes you different in a world that rewards instant rapport and loud emotional signaling. Here's the uncomfortable contrast. Most people feel like they belong because they smooth themselves down until the friction disappears. You don't do that easily. Your nervous system resists false alignment. Forced enthusiasm drains you. Small talk feels hollow, not comforting. You'd rather be quiet than fake, even if that silence makes you look strange. This pattern often shows up early. You noticed emotional undercurrents before you could name them. Crowds exhausted you more than solitude ever did. You felt older not because you were wiser, but because you were watching while others were merging. You're not broken, but you are mismatched to a system that rewards speed over depth and certainty over awareness. When a system can't use your pattern, it labels it a flaw. That label is wrong, but here's where responsibility enters. If you don't learn how to use this trait, it won't protect you. It will isolate you, and the question becomes unavoidable. Are you staying selective or slowly disappearing? You didn't decide to stand outside. It happened quietly. You learned early that things weren't consistent enough to relax into. One day people were warm, the next they weren't. Words didn't always match tone. Rules shifted depending on who had power, what mood they were in, or who was watching. Nothing dramatic, just unstable enough to stay alert. So you adapted. Before most people learned how to belong, you learned how to read. You watched faces, you tracked energy. You noticed when approval was conditional and when silence meant danger. Instead of assuming safety, you waited for confirmation. Instead of merging with groups, you stayed slightly apart. You didn't trust the surface, you trusted patterns. Let's say this clearly. Your distance is learned, not random. Psychologically, this creates a very specific orientation. Your mind prioritizes accuracy over attachment. You don't join until things make sense. You don't relax until behavior stays consistent. You earn belonging intellectually before you allow it emotionally. That makes you perceptive, careful, and hard to fool. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The strategy worked, and that's the problem, because what once protected you never turned itself off. The same alertness that kept you safe now keeps you separate. You keep scanning even when nothing is wrong. You stay one step back even when connection is available. Not because you're afraid, but because your system doesn't know how to switch modes. This is where most people lie to themselves. They think this means they're just independent or different. You're not stuck in the past. You're stuck in a pattern, and patterns don't expire on their own. They keep running until they're recognized for what they are. So here's the real question you can't avoid anymore. Is your awareness still protecting you? Or is it quietly deciding how close you'll ever let life get? You've felt this without naming it. You're in people's lives, but you're rarely inside them. Conversations stay civil, even pleasant, yet something never fully opens. People sense your distance, not as coldness, but as restraint. You're polite, engaged, present, and still slightly unreachable. Relationships reach a ceiling, not because others don't care, but because real closeness requires you to stop evaluating and start risking misunderstanding. You don't withdraw dramatically, you just never fully step forward. Over time, that half step becomes a pattern. Let's say this clearly. Being careful has a social price. Groups don't reward quiet depth the way you think they do. They reward visible commitment, emotional signaling, and clarity of position. You offer nuance and restraint. That mismatch makes you easy to overlook, not because you lack value, but because you don't announce it. Opportunities pass without conflict. No one pushes you out. You simply aren't pulled in. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Isolation doesn't arrive suddenly. It accumulates. Internally, the cost is heavier. You start calling solitude preference when it's partly avoidance. You confuse being selective with being alone. You tell yourself you're fine until connection starts feeling effortful instead of natural. The longer this goes on, the harder it becomes to reverse, because distance starts to feel normal. This is where most people lie to themselves. They mistake shrinking their world for protecting their peace. The most dangerous part isn't loneliness. It's identity erosion. You stop asking where you belong and start assuming you don't, not because it's true, but because hope feels riskier than resignation. This trait won't destroy your life loudly. It will narrow it quietly. So ask yourself honestly, are you choosing depth or slowly accepting disappearance? You've probably told yourself that time will solve this, that one day you'll feel like you belong without having to change anything. That insight, intelligence, or being deep will eventually attract the right people. It hasn't happened yet, and it won't happen on its own. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Waiting is not a strategy. Feeling out of place doesn't make you rare in the way you think it does. It makes you unpositioned, and unpositioned people don't get chosen. They get overlooked, misread, or quietly placed on the sidelines of other people's lives. Not out of cruelty, but out of confusion. People don't know where to put you. This is where most people lie to themselves. They believe understanding the pattern is enough. It isn't. If this pattern isn't consciously integrated, it hardens. You become the observer who never fully enters, the one others respect, even admire, but don't reach for, the one who understands everyone, but is rarely understood in return. Over time, that role stops feeling noble and starts feeling empty. Let's say this clearly. No one is coming to decode you. The world doesn't reward internal coherence. It rewards presence, clarity, and visible engagement. Depth without positioning doesn't make you magnetic. It makes you invisible. This isn't a call to become louder or fake. It's a warning. Withdrawal dressed up as depth still ends the same way. So the question you have to face now is simple, and it's uncomfortable. Are you willing to stay misunderstood just to avoid being seen? You already know this part of yourself isn't going away. Trying to erase it only made you smaller. Suppressing it didn't make you fit in. It just made you tired. So let's start from what's real. This trait doesn't disappear. It matures. When it's integrated, you stop mistaking distance for safety. You stop hovering on the edge of rooms waiting to see how things unfold. You still observe, but you choose when to engage instead of defaulting to restraint. Discernment becomes a tool, not a wall. Let's say this clearly. Your depth is only useful when it's visible. You don't become louder, you become clearer. You bring gravity into conversations without forcing it. People feel more grounded around you because you're no longer hiding how you see the world. You're not trying to dominate the room or impress anyone. You're simply present in your orientation, and that changes the dynamic. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Belonging for you will never feel euphoric. It won't come with applause or instant warmth. It will feel quiet, stable, almost ordinary. And that's how you'll know it's real. Your role isn't to dissolve into crowds or wear labels that don't fit. Your role is to act as a calibrator, someone who notices what's off and doesn't panic about it. This is where responsibility enters. Depth without positioning is still avoidance. Not everyone needs to fit in, but everyone has to stand somewhere on purpose. So here's the identity question that ends this loop. Will you keep observing life from the edge, or finally allow yourself to take up space without apology?